the next step in all of my trees development is going to be transferring the tree from a growing tub similar to this into a mica bonsai pot. And for those of you that aren't familiar with mica, you've got a few different kinds of pots. You've got your ceramics, and there's several different types of ceramics out there nowadays. You've got plastic pots, and then you've got something in between the two. It's a mixture or a hybrid, if you will, of plastic and ceramic, and it's called a mica pot. The reason I like mica pots is, number one, in the winter they're not going to crack. If you have a nice expensive ceramic tokonome pot, it shouldn't crack. However, hydraulic pressure may cause it to crack. So I like having the mica pots because what my thought process is I'm going to put it in a mica pot. It's a durable pot. They can't be broken unless you're putting it under extreme abuse and extreme pressure. You can take the tree out of the mica pot. It's called slip potting. So if you have a tree, let's say for instance I'm taking this tree and putting it in an exhibition. What I would do is I would take the tree out of the mica pot and slip it into a ceramic pot so that I can then take the tree to a show. So it's in a proper tokonome pot or a proper ceramic pot that would match the tree properly. And then after the show's finished, I can take it back out of that pot and slip it back into the mica pot. And then that way during winter time, if it gets a little bit too much water or something along those lines, it's not going to freeze and that hydraulic pressure is going to crack or break the pot. So I've got two here and I've got one over here pots that we're going to take a look at and see which one's going to be right for this tree. Get everything out of here. And all three of these pots are mica pots. So okay. The first pot that we have, this is a mica pot as well. It's a plastic and ceramic composite. This is a rectangular pot. It's been used once before. It's got screens and wires in it still. And the way I do this is I stand in front of the tree and I stick the pot at eye level, which is basically almost at the rim of the pot here. And I'll take a look at the tree. Now what I'm looking for is I'm looking for number one, trunk thickness in regard to width of pot. Number two, I'm looking at canopy in regard to width of pot. And I'm looking at, does this pot make the tree look like, number one, it's in too small of one where it could fall over, or two, too big of one so it looks like a teeny stick in a large area. Which, of course, even in this growing pot here, that is not the case. And then I move it back and forth like this so I can visualize the tree at different planting areas of this pot as well. And if you look at this one, you look at the outside edges of the branch, they're probably going to be sticking about 1.5 inches to 2 inches outside of the rim of the pot. You don't really want it to get too much more than that. You know, and if you move this over, you're looking at those being a little bit outside of there as well. And then one thing you want to think about when you're potting a tree is you don't want it in the very center of your pot. You want it off to one side or the other. And the same thing for all intensive purposes. You don't necessarily want it in the center of the pot. You either want it a little bit to the back or a little bit to the front, but close to the center, just off center. And sometimes you can't always do that as well. But for this pot, it's pretty shallow, and it's almost the right size, but not quite. I think it's just a little bit small for this tree. I'm visualizing this tree and the root spread. It could pass in this pot, but I just think that this pot is a little bit too small. Now, also you want to look at the depth of the pot as well. If you have a root base underneath here that's a really deep root base, or a tree that needs a lot more water, per se, you might want to think about using a little bit thicker pot. Now, there's been some research and some things that have gone on back and forth, that say, you know, only the first inch or two of the bottom of the pots where really the water retention is. And that, yes, that's true to a sense. In different soil types, it will be a little bit different as well. My trees being watered in the morning every other day on an automatic watering system that I have set up, hooked up to my lawn sprinkler system outside. I'm not going to have the luxury of being home all the time to make sure that the trees don't dry out. So I'm going to always tend to put my trees in a little bit deeper pot so I have more soil surface there, which in turn, in my opinion, is going to keep it moist longer throughout the day. So the next pot that we have to choose from is an oval. And I've got several different sizes of ovals, and this is the one that I've come up with that I think is going to be pretty close to the size oval pot that would be good for this tree. And this is a 17-inch oval from side to side, 17 inches. Now if we look at this, we put it up to here, and we take a look at the tree, the edges of the branches are right about at the lip of the pot on both sides. And that's what I'm talking about, where you don't want it to be closer or even stick out real far from the edge of the pot, because then it makes the tree look like it's too large for the pot that it's in. This one, these outlying branches, depending on where we put it in here, are going to be close to at the rim of the pot. So this is one option that we have. The next option is a 17-inch rectangular pot. Okay, and this one's a little bit different than the other rectangular pot we have in that the corners are clipped, they're not rounded. This is a square pot where the corners have a little bit of a detail on them, and it's a little bit deeper pot than the other one, and it's got this recessed square area that's clipped to kind of match. This is kind of similar to what you would see in a ceramic tokonoma pot. And so this is our third option. And if we put this up here and take a look at the tree, we can go back and forth with it, look at different options and different planting angles, okay, and come up with what we think is the best for this tree. Now to me, with the thickness of the bark and the nice taper and everything on this tree, something else we need to discuss is masculine versus feminine trees. Masculine trees are typically going to be thicker trunked, not so much of a taper, not so much of a long sweeping taper, but a shorter, more abrupt taper. The bark on a masculine tree is typically going to be craggy. Not always, because then you have your literati style pines that have the craggy barks and things like that. But when I think of a feminine tree, I'm thinking of a long, skinny, slender tree that has long, flowing, wispy branching and things along those lines. To me, this tree right here is borderline feminine or masculine. It could kind of go either way. And I think, honestly, this tree looks best in a square pot versus an oval pot. But then again, the oval pot looks pretty good as well. So we've got some looking and some thinking to do. And I'm going to take my time and I'm going to look at both of these pots, consider them both, and then I'm going to make a final decision. The pyracantha, for instance, it's got a thick trunk, so it's fairly masculine, but the bark is very smooth and it has a nice slender sweeping line of trunk into a nice canopy. So to me, that tree was a little bit more on the feminine side, and it looked better in an oval than it did in a rectangular pot. So that's, to me, is what I felt looked best for that tree, so that's what I put it in. There are also drum style pots, which are round or rectangular or octagonal, actually, hexagonal or octagonal in design, or even round. There's a pot called a cloud pot, which is similar to an oval, only it has details on all the edges, so it's not quite a round or quite an oval. It's a little bit different design, but in the overall shape it would be like in an oval, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. I typically will go for either a rectangular or an oval shaped pot for most of my trees. The round pots and the oval pots are usually reserved for different styles of trees. Now, not always. If you have a formal upright that doesn't necessarily have a front, then you could do something like a round pot. They're typically called a drum pot or an oval or a cloud pot, excuse me. But most of my trees that I'm going to have are going to be either in an oval or a rectangle, because those are the styles that are typically seen. The style of trees being informal uprights are typically seen in an oval or rectangular style pot. So I'm going to take a couple minutes here, look at these 3 pots, consider each one very carefully, take my time. This is not something you want to snap judgment on. So we'll get back to once I've selected my pot. I'm going to go ahead and take the tree out of this pot and then show you what I do as far as repotting is concerned, and then root pruning as well. So we'll be back here in a few moments. Stick with us. Now that we've got the tree out of its training pot and a good majority of the soil removed, as well as some root trimming so we can fit it inside of these pots, now it's time to take a look at these trees in the pots so we can come up with a final determination of what we are going to see as being the best front, the best planting position, and the best pot for the overall composition. Where I've got the tree in the pot currently here is about where I would like to see it as far as a planting angle and position in the pot. It's off center to the left, or to, well, if you're looking at the pot, it would be to the left side of the pot. The planting angle is showing a little bit more movement in the trunk line. If I get the heck out of the way so you can see, it's showing more movement in the trunk line. I've actually taken the planting angle forward to back and straightened it up considerably as well. It was leaning forward quite a bit on the other planting angle that this tree had in the growing container, which I always knew I was going to have to change anyway, so I wasn't really too worried about it at the time. I was more focused on getting branch development and what have you. But I've trimmed the bottom of the tree at an angle like this, so when I put it in the pot at the proper planting angle, the root base will be flat at the bottom. So that's one option that we have, and you can see that these back branches and even these side branches are right at the edge of the pot. And that's kind of what you're looking for as far as size of pot in conjunction with size of tree. So let's hit this with a 360 real quick so you can kind of see what it looks like all the way around. It's a little bit farther back in the pot, off of center towards the rear, because the front of the tree is almost in line with the rim of the pot in the front. So the tree is still balanced inside of the pot. It's off center at the trunk, but it doesn't stick out beyond the rim of the pot. If I had a straight edge shooting up here like this, the rim of the pot is actually out a little bit farther than the tree sits in the pot, and that's kind of important as well. You don't want a tree that looks like it's going to fall down as it's facing you, but you want it to lean forward as if it's there to embrace you. So we've got that going on, and I'm going to have some manipulation of these branches once I get it into its final planting angle. This is just what I had gotten initially, I guess you could say. But that's what it looks like in the oval. To me, this oval's a little deep, to be honest, but it's what I have to work with. If I had a more shallow oval, I would probably prefer it, but knowing what's going to end up happening this summer with the heat and everything that we have here in South Carolina, I'm going to need to have it in a deeper pot, just for the simple fact that more surface area of soil is going to contain more moisture, which is going to be more healthy for the root system. And speaking of the root system on this tree, it had so many roots. I mean, it was just a big mass of roots in that growing pot. Now, this tree is one of the older trees that I have, so I was expecting that, and so that just tells me that my soil mix is correct for my environment. I've got enough of a ratio between organics and inorganics, meaning the turfus or the dry stall or the lava or what have you, whatever you end up putting in your soil mix. The ratio is correct for my environment. If you're in a wetter environment, you may want to go with a little bit more inorganic versus organic, because the organic is going to kind of hold and retain moisture a little bit more, with the exception of lava, of course. Lava is an inorganic that's extremely porous, that's going to hold a lot of water as well, but enough on the soil. We're focusing on the tree and the pot that it's going in and what have you. So that's one option that I have, and I'm kind of liking it. And of course we can adjust the tree in the pot as well, just for the purposes of looking at the tree currently. This is what I see potentially for this tree as far as a planting angle, number one, and potential placement in the pot. It's not exact, but it gives you a point of reference. So let's go ahead and take it out of this one and put it into the rectangular pot that I have. Now the smaller of the two rectangular pots is going to be too small for this tree, so it's out no matter what. So I'm not even going to bother with that one. But this is a good option for this tree. And the next one we're going to right now is we're going to remove it from this one. Of course, being careful, I have knocked a little bit of the bark off, nothing major, but I'm trying to retain as much of that flaky bark, and it's really, really hard to do because it's very fragile. It's designed to flake off and fall off of the tree as the tree grows. But to me, it adds a whole lot of interest to the tree, so I want to try to retain as much of it as I can, and I'm not being real successful. I had a big chunk of it right here in the back get knocked off while I was repotting it, which is to be expected. But that's okay. A couple more years from now, and it'll start doing this again. So let's get it out of this pot, and let's get it onto the other rectangular pot that I have. And move it over here out of the way in a secured area so I can get the rectangular pot up here. And then we'll get it swapped over into this pot, and we'll take a look at it in this pot and see if it looks better or worse. And then that way we can make our final decision on pot choice. As you can see, the root base on this thing is just completely covered. I mean, it's got so many fine feeder roots and everything in it that it's awesome. Now, I'm going to have to do a little bit of trimming to get it into this pot, I think. I don't think it's going to just go ahead and sit in this pot. Again, you see what I mean by even this rectangle, which I'm not sure if I have a larger one right now available. It's not overly large. Will work for this tree as well. It is a lot. Let me take a look at this here real quick. I may not even worry about it. Just looking at where it's at currently, and I don't know, it might do pretty well in this pot. Go ahead and get the roots trimmed up real quick so we can try to fit it into this pot. Okay, and it still needs a little bit of trimming if I utilize this pot here. But here's what it would look like in a rectangular pot as opposed to the oval pot. Now, just personally, to me, on first impression, this smaller pot makes the tree look about twice as big, meaning root base versus volume of pot. It looks like the trunk is really huge trunk in this pot. The branching is right about at the limits of being almost out too far for this pot. Not real crazily, but you know, we look here at the back corner, they're right at the edge. These back branches right here are sticking a little bit over the edge of the pot, which of course we can always cut those back, or cut back to maybe this branch here and eliminate this outer lying area. Boom, take that off and focus on this and this being the two branches to fill this out, because we've still got quite a bit here. This corner here, it's in considerably. We still got some area to work with. This whole side here is back a considerable amount, so it's still okay there. We can always cut back some of this in here as well. So we still have some options as far as that's concerned. If you look at it this way, the tree is leaning quite a bit farther forward in this pot than the other pot, which can be corrected by taking more off the bottom of the back of this tree, which we can do. The more we take off the back, the farther the tree's going to want to stand upright in the pot. I would like to see it probably about right there as the proper planting angle for the tree. So we've still got a little bit of work to do there if we use this pot. I've stuffed it to in this pot, I guess this would be, as you're looking at it, it's the left side of the pot. Standing like the tree is the right side of the pot. Basically, farther this way on the pot than this side, because our longest branch is over here on this side, so we want to balance that out. The tree is inclined a little bit towards the rear of the pot, more so than the front of the pot, of course, because it has a pretty dramatic lean towards the front as well that we've got to kind of compensate for. And we're going to be compensating for that in planting angle as well, but it's always going to have that forward leaning appearance. But we want to minimize it, again, to the point where it's not looking like the tree's falling over. And I like this pot for this tree. I like the oval a lot as well. The oval gives me more options. But personally, I think that I wish I had one of these one size up. This is a 14. I wish I had like a 16. If I had a 16, that would be absolutely perfect for this tree. And I can always order one, and what I can do is this growing season leave it in the 14, let it get established, and then next year slip it out of the 14 into the 18, which will be, in my opinion, just about perfect. So we do have that as an option for this tree, and I can always cut back some of these branches in favor of the smaller branches back in here to bring this in. I don't really want to do that because I like where this is at right now as far as branches are concerned. But I kind of like this smaller pot, just for, like I said, in this pot it makes the tree look more massive, and that's ultimately the illusion that we're trying to create, is a large ancient tree standing out in the middle of a woodland or out in the middle of a field. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and work this so it can go into this pot. I think is going to be our goal, is to get this tree in this pot. And so that's what I'm going to be working on here next. Like I said, I've got 2 trees out there now. I got one, to be honest with you, the pot that I need for this tree, the trident maple's sitting in currently. But the trident maple's got a trunk about twice the size of this one, so I need that pot for the trident maple. So this is what we've got, and I've got 3 more of this size. I thought I had one that was one size up, but I don't. So, not a big deal. I don't think the pot's too small for the tree. I think it's pushing the limits, but I still think we can make it work. So let me go ahead and do some more root trimming. And the root trimming I'm going to be doing is on the bottom, not on the top. I'm going to be trimming everything from the bottom of the tree, so it'll sit down and be able to be inclined more upright. And it's going to take some work, and again, lost another chunk of bark, which, you know, if it happens, it happens. Oh well. Not a whole lot I can do about it. I was wanting to try to keep as much of it as I can. I know I sound like a broken record with that, but it just, if it works out, great, and if it doesn't, oh well. So let me go ahead and get this thing out of here, get the roots trimmed back on the bottom of this thing, get the planting angle correct, and get it wired in, and then I'll come back when I start filling the soil back in around the tree. Another thing I do want to mention is I've got quite a bit of moss growing on the surface roots of the tree, and I need to get that cleaned off as well, because all that's going to do is start running up the bark, and that's not something that we want to keep as well, because it will prematurely rot this flaking bark out, and we don't want to prematurely rot it out because it's already falling off easy enough as it is. So I've got a few things I got to do, so let me go ahead and get to those. I'm not going to bore you with it because there's really, it's nothing technical about it. It's just getting the tree up in the air and cutting the roots back underneath, whether it's with scissors or root knob cutters or what the case may be, to get it to sit in the pot properly. And it's a pretty arduous process, and something that needs to be done, because right now the tree is down. Well, that's down in the pot as far as it's going to go, but the planting angle's wrong, so I had to push it down in the bottom, which tells me I need to trim the bottom down more than the front. But I don't want the nebari sticking up much higher than the surface of the pot as well, because I don't want the tree to look like it's sitting on top of the pot, more so that it's in the pot. So I'm going to have to trim some of the bottom off the front of this tree as well, but I'm going to have to do more in the rear than in the front for the planting angle purposes. But it's going to need a haircut on the bottom of this all the way across the board. So let me go ahead and get that done. I don't want to jeopardize any roots or any root structure that I have now, but it does need to be done, because eventually most bonsai exhibition pots are about this deep or shallower. So we need to make this tree be able to fit in this kind of, this depth of pot or shallower. So it'd have to be done eventually anyway. But I do like this tree in this pot, more so than the oval. I mean, the oval was good, but it's awful deep compared to this one, and that's my feeling. So let's go ahead and get to that, and I'll come back once I've got the tree trimmed up, wired in the pot, and ready to put the soil in. Stick with us. Okay, so now I've got the tree taken care of. The tree's sitting over here off to the side in the oval pot, stationary, so I can do the rest of the work I need to do, the pot itself. I'm going to knock this this old bonsai soil out of this pot. Show you. On the bottom, there are 4 screens that I've got in here. And I'm going to need to put some wire in here to wire this in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one wire through here and here, and then the other wire through here and here, since I only have 4 drain holes. A lot of times these pots will have drain holes and smaller holes where you put the wire through. And I could drill holes in here to do that, but I just don't think it's necessary at the moment, because we've got a lot of areas that we can exploit in the root base of the tree now. Some of these are a little bit on the loose side, so I just want to come up underneath here and reaffirm everything and get everything nice and tight. And then what I like to do is flip the pot over underneath, and I'll take my wire and I'll feed it in, and I'll look for a hole in the screen or the mesh that I use. And word on the mesh, you can buy it from a bonsai supply store if you'd like, but this is how I buy it. It's I think a 12 by 8 or 12 by 9, and this mesh can be found at a craft store, whether it's Michael's, Joann Fabrics, what have you, and it's needlepoint mesh. It's the same stuff that you buy as bonsai screen, and I think these are like $2 for this huge piece. So, you know, you can buy it already cut, or you can buy it this way. This is the way I buy it, because I go through a lot of trees and I need a cheaper alternative than buying it from a bonsai company. So this is what I use. Same stuff. It's identical stuff. It comes in white like this and black, and it's got a really fine mesh to it. It's not so fine you can't get your wire through, but it's fine enough it's not going to let the soil to come out. So this is what I use for my mesh. So let me get these. I'll go through 2 of the holes that are closest to the edge of where the wire is going to be used to tie down. And then I will come through here, pull it out, pull it tight, loop it around the edges just to hold it in place. And I'll come over here, my other wire, and do the exact same thing. Feed it through, flip it over. Pull this around to make it even. Fold them over. And then what I do is, after I fold them over, I'll come in here and push them down to the edges. Okay? Of where I think I'm going to need them to be. So then you got something that looks like this. Okay? Then what I do before I ever place the tree is I come in here with some soil, some freshly mixed soil, not used soil, of course. I've got a 55-gallon drum sitting over here. I mix at a time. Actually getting a little low, so I'm going to have to mix some more here before too long. We'll put about a scoop in here. I'm going to mound it up in the center. Might actually be a little bit too much. Put some of this back. So I got to remember that I've got to try to get this thing down in here. So I've got a good amount of soil in here, mounded up in the center. So when I place the tree in here, what I'm going to do is be working the tree back and forth, okay, to try to get it settled into the pot. What that's going to do is this soil that's underneath, it's going to work itself into all the nooks and crannies underneath the root base. Okay, so we don't have to do a whole ton of chopstick work to get cavities underneath the tree filled. So now we'll bring our tree over. Get it set in here. You can see how high it's setting currently. I've done a lot of root trimming to get this thing down in here where it belongs. So what I do is I come in here and I'm going to settle this in. Working it back and forth. And side to side. To get it settled where I want it. Okay, that's a done deal. Tree is secured in the pot. Now, we just come back in here with soil and fill in all the spaces. Yeah, I'm using an old Tide container that I cut the front of it off. I don't have any scoops yet. Don't really know if I'm a fan of scoops or not because I've never tried them. I will look into possibly getting some, but this works for me for now. And then I had already bought the Tide, so it was just, you know, recycled. And does well for me. I'm eventually going to look into an alternate to using this scoop because it's kind of cumbersome in some ways, and for others it's good because it has a large capacity. So what I do is I'll come in here like this with soil and I'll mount it up in the center of the tree where the nabari is. And then I come in with my fingers instead of a chopstick because I like using my fingers a lot better because I can actually feel where the voids are. I can really focus on getting, I can kind of do two things at once. I can move soil down into any voids that may be there, as well as move soil around to those voids all kind of at the same time. Another thing that I'll do is I'll go around the edges, after I'm done doing this part. I'll push them down. Create almost like a little trough. This is doing two things. This is pushing the roots currently that are in this pot down so they're not sticking up all over the place. Number two. Going to help me a little bit to get planting angle finalized. Once I get that done, I do typically follow up with chopstick as well. And cool little thing I did with that, if you remember, when I was trimming the Trident maple, I busted the large concave cutter from Bonsai Vision, which literally 3 days later I had a new one replaced, so I can't say enough about their customer service. And all I had to do is provide a photograph of it, and showing it's busted, and he sent one out and I had it in 3 days time. So what I did is I took the old one and I cut it off here, and I took it to my grinder and I ground it to a, not a sharp point, but a point nonetheless. I'm telling you what, I'm starting to like this a lot for doing the chopstick method and getting soil, really getting soil packed down in there after I use my fingers. But also using it as a root rake, because this is a non-invasive, as much as possible, way of really getting the roots trimmed out or the soil loosened up around the base of the tree without doing much damage to anything. And this can kind of do more than my fingers can, but I like using my fingers for the initial to find all the obvious areas that I need to fill in. And then I come back with this afterward. Pretty good cavity there. But I use this afterward to really get anything else packed in there that need be. Gives us that. I'll also go along the edges and vibrate the soil in the pot. I find this helps also to anything that potentially would be needing to find a spot. It really helps to settle the soil in as well. Okay, and then we just come back with our final top layer of soil. And I intentionally fill this a little bit heavy, and the reason I do this is, number one, the soil that I'm using is really dry, so when I water it in, it's going to settle. And when it settles, it's going to compact a little bit. And so the soil level now is here. Once I water it in, it's going to be about ½ inch lower than where it's currently sitting. And then again, like I said, the final thing that I do is just come around this edge and really pack down the soil around the outside edge. And this is, again, doing two things. Number one, it's taking all the roots that are on this tree that were growing outward, and it's pushing them down at an angle like this. The tree roots were growing outward, and it's pushing them down at an angle like this. And it's also creating an area for any excess soil to fill in flush. And when you water this thing, the water is going to run out to the edges. And when it does that, it's going to run out and it's going to hit the edge of the pot. Instead of going over the pot, it's going to hit the edge of this and go down this edge of the soil and help saturate the soil underneath. Alright, we just got a few things to do here now as far as final pruning is concerned. And that's why I don't always take everything off all at once when I do these trees, is because I always come back afterward, like these branches in the back here. You can see this branch sticking out quite a bit. I think what I'm going to do is eliminate it to there. It brings everything in more. And then I've got this as my new leader. Bring this out like this now, which allows for that. I think what I'm going to do here is with this, I'm going to come back to there. I'm seriously contemplating coming back to here. This out. I'm liking that. I'm liking this. It's there. Take this to here. Bring this forward. This here. Move it just a little bit this way. Move this a little bit this way. Move that there. So, and of course the big decision, I'm liking it because right now I've got tap, 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 and there's pretty good spacing. I think we're going to eliminate, this top in favor of that branch right there. That little itty bitty guy right there. I'm going to use my big concave cutters to do it. Those are the sphericals. Get the regulars out. Prep them. I'm going to do this in a series of cuts. I'm not going to do it all in one cut. So first I'm going to come in here to about right here, and I'm going to cut about a quarter of the way through. I'm going to make a cut. Okay, and I'm going to follow that one up with another cut, another quarter of the way through. And then I'm going to do it again with another cut, another quarter of the way through. Usually at this third quarter, it'll pop the top off completely. Sometimes that way when I come back in here, all I got's this little itty bit to worry about now. And if I was a rooting man, I could take that and root it and turn it into a little shohin tree, but not my bag of tricks. So now that I've got this, I need to go ahead and do it again. So this time we're cutting for taper. And now as you can see, when I do these cuts now, it just pops everything up above it off. And let's go and take some of this off. Take some of this off. And bring our new top up. Just like so. Tighten the wiring on this just a little bit. So it knows we're serious. Right. I'm happier about that, to be honest with you. Kind of digging it. Now I'm going to get in here with too big of a tool and screw it up, so I need to move down to the correct tool for this job, which I'm actually going to come clear down to my little favorite tool. going to sneak up on this thing. Which means now I can come here. My wire cutters. Come back to you. Here with these and do that. Okay. It's good there. Take that back to there. I need to wire that one into position now. Take this one back to here. Those are back as far as they can be. That's good. Good. Got that back now, which hopefully eventually you can take it back even further. That's good there. Alright, now let's put some cut paste on it. Get everything healed up real good. Always the last thing I do is the cut paste. Always. I don't necessarily put it on the small stuff, and I say always the last thing I do. I got one little teeny weeny wire to put on that branch right there, but typically I put cut paste on at the very end, which I guess you can consider this the very end for due to time constraints on this video. And again, by doing this, this also may force some back budding to happen, which is going to be a good thing. Because then hopefully I can get some smaller bud pops up here towards the top that I can immediately start working with as far as new branches are concerned. My favorite cut paste has always been this Kiono in the tube. And the reason I like it is the tube looks like this. I think I got a new tube. Let me see if I can find a new tube and pull it out for you. Yep. It comes in a box. So I've had a lot of people ask me, what cut pastes do I use? I ought to just do a video about the cut pastes that I use. But the one that I use primarily is Kiono, or Kiono. It comes in a box that looks like this. Okay, it's just all Japanese writing. And when you get in this box, you pull out the tube, and this is what the tube looks like. Oop. Okay, and it's just a green paste. And the reason I like it is when it dries to it's still slightly flexible the first few years. When it dries to almost like a plastic consistency. But this is what it looks like when it comes out of the tube. It's like a really sticky, toothpastey kind of rubber cementy type of stuff. But works really well for me, and I've used it for a long time, and that's my preferred cut paste. So, other than getting this one little branch wired and getting it watered in, this is it for this year. So let me zoom in. So take a look. What we got. Thank you for watching.